Good. So tonight we are at this exciting topic of discipline, the one we all have been looking for. Because when we think of children, that is the first thing everyone thinks about. That is the highlight word of children, is the discipline thing. Now actually I want to disappoint you, because discipline to me is very low on the priority list. When we think of raising children, it's not so much about discipline as what is the word, if someone would be able to offer an opinion, what it is actually about. Discipline comes from what word? Discipling. That's the word we're looking for. So when we think of discipline, don't think of just the rod or just spanking the child. Think of discipling your child. So in the first place, the method of spanking or punishing the child, or whatever you want to call it, is just a method. It's just a tool of a whole process. So actually we will spend twice as much time, I'll give you that, on tonight than on the discipling part, because if we get this right, then the discipling is actually not so hard. But it is a big thing, the discipline. I agree with that. But in the whole thing, it is just the tool. It is not it's just the method, means to an end. It is not the end. It is just the means to an end. So when we think of discipline, you must really make an effort to really make that switch in your mind. That even though it is very important, it is just the means to an end. Though, if we do not do that, interestingly enough, there's an incredible scripture that tells what happens if we don't do that. Now, in previous generations, I think, let's think back about my parents' generation, for instance, were incredibly strict. They were very, very strict. I mean, a child was seen, he was not heard. That was the idiom of the day, and it was treated that way. You were seen, you were not heard. Definitely not. So they were very disciplined. They were very set on that. And then there came a switch. During my generation, there came a shift towards more attention, more love. I have to say that our parents were raised during after the Depression years and after World War II, which meant that finances was a problem. The parents had to really start from scratch, their parents, and they worked incredibly hard. So if I think, and if I listen to all my parents and their friends, and I've listened to many stories over the years, those were hard days. Those were days when it was hard to just survive, basically. And then when we were raised, things were easier. And then came the next generation. Most of you would be a bit in between that. But things became comfortable. There's not so much hardship, and there's more time for what we would say love. Now, if we think of the complete concept of love, does it mean now that we throw discipline out the door? Because that is what actually happened. People have a concept in their minds that it's either discipline or love. But it's not either or. Discipline is part of love. Without laws, there is no freedom. But we want the freedom, and we do not want the laws. We see laws as restrictions. We see it as restrictive to what we want in life and how we want to live. And because we felt so sorry for ourselves being treated very strictly, we didn't want to do that to our children. We spoke last time about the children who had to sit very still in church. So now, please, I don't want to do that to my child. So now we don't teach them, we don't train them to sit still at all. Now we have new concepts in raising children, such as ADHD. Things that have started happening on account of just doing things differently. Because previously it was not such a problem. Then why is it now a problem? Now, maybe you can't remember back as far back as I can, because I may be much older. But to just give you an idea on that, the French say, I read an article that says, why don't the French have ADHD? They have an instance of ADHD that they are treated and on medication and are certified as this is kids with ADHD of 0.7%. 0.7%. The Australians and the Americans have between 8 and 11%. 8 and 11% of kids that are actually on medication for ADHD. Just one instance. And one of the reasons that the French claim, they look at this and they say, well, we actually believe that our kids must be spanked. We believe that, a good spanking at the right time is good for them. And if they are upset about something and we cannot do anything about it, let them cry it out. Okay? So it means that they have organized, disciplined children. Unlike the Americans, and I heard the Australians as well, just to name two countries where discipline really went for a loop. So why do we discipline? Let's just talk about that. Why do we discipline? We discipline because there's a scripture in Esther 1, verse, I think it's 11, verse 17. If I could just read that for you. Esther 1, verse 17. It's a very interesting scripture. It says the following, for the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report. King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. All right, so now we have a bit of history here. What happened was that King Ahasuerus had this huge feast. It went on for weeks on end, actually I think for months on end. Then he had this specific part of the feast, and he wanted Queen Vashti, who was apparently beautiful, he wanted her to come and be shown to all his people. He wanted to show her off. Now, whatever the circumstances, people have argued about that for ages and generations. I don't want to go into that now. What is interesting, though, is what they say here, that the fact that she did not come, if this is reported to the other people in the kingdom, and the wives of the other princes hears that Queen Vashti could get away with this, she did not come and nothing happened, they will despise their husbands. Now think about that for a moment. If anyone that is in authority does not assert that authority, and for instance, they tell you to do something and you decide, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't like doing that. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't do me good. I've decided it's not good for me, whether you are a child or whether you are a parent or an adult. When you can get away with it, that's the same reaction. You despise that person. You can't even make me do that. So what do I think of your authority? You can't make me. So what kind of leader are you when you can't make me do something that you told me I should do? Do you see the problem we have? So what parents want their children to do is they want to be friends with their children, whereas in the previous generations there wasn't always that relationship. Now they think that by being less strict on their children and not disciplining them so strictly, and it's a question of where is too strict and where is not strict enough, but we'll talk about that a bit later. But if you do not discipline them, they will despise you. So what the parent thinks is the child will love me more. What the child thinks is, I don't think you're a leader. I don't think much of your leadership. Just because they can get away with it. And the problem is it just gets worse and worse. So now when they are young, it shows at a certain age, because if we look at these phases, in the third phase, where we said this was the one of immediate obedience. If we look at this phase of the suckling and we say we have not settled that subject of immediate obedience and they go over into the child, you will reap that phase where it looks like a terrible two. They are unruly, they are undisciplined, they do just what they want. But somewhere in their child years, they kind of settle down a bit. Have you seen kids like that? They're incredibly difficult. Why? Because it is a phase where you go over from one to the other. Certain things have to be established. And if they are not established, that child feels insecure. And they try to set the boundaries themselves. They kind of force you to put the boundaries down, but you don't. Because now they're getting very difficult, and now you feel uncertain, you back off, and they go more and more, and you back off more and more because this doesn't look good. And most parents are really scared of those children. To tell you the truth, I'm scared of them as well. It's not nice looking at them. Seeing a young kid of 2-3 years old throw a tantrum that's not been disciplined much is really terrifying. It is really terrifying, I'm telling you. But they do settle down because the child years are the years of settling and they get interested in a lot of other stuff. And we said that's the knowledge phase, the child phase. So now they go into knowledge and they discover things and they settle down a bit. They kind of forget about it. But then we get to the next phase. From the child, we go into the young adult and we get the same problem. Because if the discipline factor has not been settled and fastened, then because it is again a thing of knowing where my boundaries are, and because it's such an important phase of going into almost self-discipline, that child, when they feel uncertain, they act out, okay? And they will act out towards you. So whereas you can still get away with just giving love and, oh no, please just calm down, take a cookie, take a sweetie, I've seen that so many times. Just pacify the child, don't discipline him, give him what he wants. But when he gets to this phase, it gets more difficult to give him what he wants. This now gets to be a problem because now you can't just give what they want. They want things that they really can't have. And then it starts to be a real problem. They draw away completely. Okay, so we discipline for protection. We discipline for protection. If my child wants to touch the hot stove, it would be worse for them to have burn scars and all the pain that goes with that and the whole experience that doesn't just take a moment to go away. It is days and weeks of pain and depending on how bad the situation is, rather than discipline them and say, don't you dare touch that stove or that hot kettle or whatever it is that they are playing with, or the fire. Stand back from the fire, you are too close. So you are doing it not to harm them, you are doing it to protect them. In protecting them, in disciplining them, you are protecting them from something much worse. And you as the parent, you as the leader, you as the authority figure must have the wisdom to know, I'm doing the right thing. Whether that child likes me for it or not, I am doing the right thing. I am protecting that child from something much worse, even though they don't see or recognize that now. So it is a positive thing. It is not a negative thing. This is scripture I want to read to you about that in Proverbs 23, verse 13. 23. It says, do not withhold correction from a child, for if you beat him with a rod, he will not die. You shall beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. It's quite a harsh word. That's there's another one that we'll read later on, but that's quite a harsh word, that one. I never could understand, why do we have to be so harsh almost? Because you go straight against that child's wishes at that moment. And sometimes it looks like a little battle. It can be quite a battlefield, especially if you have a really, really strong-willed child. You have to put everything into that. Let's not call it a fight, but it can sometimes look like that, especially if you're not used to the situation or you don't know the child or the circumstances. It's not comfortable. It's not nice. It's not easy. And you have to really take hold of yourself and raise your own authority and go into that situation, because you are going straight against what they want to do. But why? Why do we have to do that? And then I discovered an interesting thing. As we were going through different courses, one day we were doing a specific course where someone spoke about the way our brain functions. And this man said something incredibly interesting. He said, we only remember the highs and the lows of our past. So we only remember, if I can maybe show you, it looks like this. You never remember the in-between parts. You only remember the lows and the highs, the too much parts of your past. The places in your life where you were very excited or where you were very upset or sad. Isn't that true? Things that meant a lot to you, almost like in overdrive. Those are the things that you really remember. Not like all the everyday thingies, they kind of disappear. They go very vague. Okay? You remember all the too much things, whether it's positive or negative. And then he said, because when something happens that is really very exciting or very upsetting, your brain releases adrenaline. And because of the adrenaline, the memory is fixed in your brain. The adrenaline causes the memory to be fixed in your brain. But without the adrenaline, it will not happen. So the Lord said to me at that stage, because I was actually at that very, very specific phases with my own children, and the Lord said to me, but that is why. What you are doing is you are creating a crisis. You are creating a crisis for that child. You go against that child's will and wishes, and you create a crisis where you do something to the child that they do not like. So what happens is you force the child to release adrenaline so that what you're trying to teach that child can be memorized. And suddenly I realized that makes sense. Suddenly I thought, oh, that makes absolute sense. So we'll come back to that point and later again as to how we discipline. But just remember that it's important to create the crisis. It must be almost a crisis for that child. Otherwise, he will not remember it. And you'll have to go through the same episode again and again and again. Almost like, I remember one afternoon, we had friends over and they had 3 little boys, and the youngest was 18 months. And we have a sliding door in the family room with a gate, sliding gate, security gate. And this little boy found it incredibly interesting to keep sliding that gate back and forth and back and forth. But of course, an 18-month-old baby with a sliding door or a gate, he would eventually, after a few slides, his fingers would get caught. And it would be a terrible noise, and then the mother would come and she would first calm him down, and then she would say, don't you do that again. And she would give him a little slap on his, on the nappy, but it was really just a little, it didn't mean anything because he kept doing it. So I was sitting there and I was thinking, not so much the disturbance to the conversation, but it's irrelevant. It doesn't mean a thing, and it's just going to repeat again and again and again. And I could see the pattern going, and I realized it's a pattern in this child's life. So I said eventually, I scraped together all my courage. It's nice when I stand in front of you all, and you're all, I'm not talking to anyone in particular, but if I'm talking to a particular mother, try telling someone they're doing something wrong with their children. Oh my word, you don't want to go there. So I was scraping together all my courage, and eventually I said, don't you think you're spanking him a little bit too softly? And I was literally holding my breath. And I remember that mother, she turned around at me and she said, do you think so? But I could see by her attitude that she was not upset or anything. She was obviously so irritated by now. I could tell her anything and she would take it. And I suppose my attitude was right. So she said to me, do you really think so? And I'm like, yes, I know so. Please go for it. And then my husband comes in and he says, you know what? besides the point, you as a father are also sitting here. It's not the mother's duty to spank him right now. You are here. Why haven't you done anything up till now? So then I quietly disappeared out of the conversation and gratefully gave it over. And the father was like, really? But, it's the mother's job. He said, no, it's not. It's your job to come in. And the next time it happened, they really gave him a nice hot slap that he felt that. It wasn't just just a little bit of a sting. He felt that. It was uncomfortable. He didn't like it. And guess what? He didn't do it again. He didn't do it again. So, not so difficult. All right. So, how do we discipline our children? The main thing, the one thing that is above everything is being consequent. I know you've heard this. I know everyone says this, but I will also say it. If you are not consequent, you strengthen their behavior, and it becomes worse and worse. So next time, you will have a harder battle to convince them that they are doing the wrong thing. And you will have to put more energy behind it and more of your authority, and it will just be worse for everyone involved. So the faster you decide as a couple, and we spoke about that earlier, the faster you decide as a couple, listen, this is the rules in this house. Don't make too many rules when they are young. Just pick a few rules, and we'll talk about it now. What we discipline, we'll talk about it a bit later. But make a few rules and stick to that. Be consequent and get that done. Then we can look at other things and make the rules more. But just start with a few rules and basic things and start the process where they get to understand it's actually easy and good to be obedient. Because then everyone relaxes. There's no more unpleasantness. There's no more consequences, and the consequences obviously involves punishment. Whatever form it takes, it's unpleasant. And that's the main idea. You want to create a crisis, as we said, so it must be unpleasant. And we'll talk about the methods also later. There's many methods, but it must be consequent. The people who study our brains all agree that it takes at least 40 times for you to repeat something before it forms a pattern in your brain. If you do it 40 times in a row, you will have formed a new habit. And that is what we are trying to establish with our children. Remember, we said it's not the tool, it's a process of discipleship. We want them to become mature people. We want them actually to become mature Christians. We are training them for that. It's a process of training them. So if we can get them to do it 40 times in a row, they will have formed a habit. But 40 times is quite a lot. Does it surprise you then that we have to keep on saying, say thank you, say please, say thank you, say please? I'm telling you, once they start bringing someone home when they are older, they suddenly remember that. But some of them, it takes 18 years or longer for them to just remember to always say thank you, please, good morning with a smile. Some of them still get up in the mornings and I'm like, right. I wish you'd now start meeting your husband or your wife. Then you'll maybe wake up with a smile, because who's going to tolerate that face? But that's the idea. We want mature men and women who can take control of themselves. Calmness, the second thing. We must be consequent. Then the next thing is be calm. Remember, we want to create a crisis to do what? To teach them a lesson. Whatever we want to teach them, it's a specific principle or lesson. But if I am upset, what will they remember? Mommy was upset, so why was she upset? And we as human beings, because we need acceptance, it's our fuel on which we function. If they remember that mommy was or daddy was upset, they feel rejected, they feel they don't love me, they remember I'm not good enough. Whatever I do is not good enough. Those are the lessons that they learn instead of the simple thing you really wanted them to understand. So I know it's difficult. We're human. It's not so easy. So in the spur of the moment, when they've done something for the 10th time in a row and you have already spanked them or punished them, whatever form it takes, how many times, and they still keep doing that, we are human. But we have to also take control of ourselves and remember that it's about the message. It's about what we want to teach them. The crisis is to teach them a principle, not for them to feel rejected or unloved, because that's not true. It's not about that there's something wrong with them. Remember, we said discipling them, we've started off in the first chapters, and we said, what's their identity? Their identity is in Christ, and that is perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. They must always experience that acceptance from us. Always they must know that they are loved and they are accepted fully. What they are doing now is not right. We don't agree with what they are doing because it's not good for them. And that's the next rule of raising children or disciplining them, is that it's not for you to look good. Do I shock you? Think about that one. Because a lot of the discipline we do is because we feel ashamed when our kids are doing whatever they are doing. And that's not the principle. Kids are kids. It's a process. They will make mistakes, and I guarantee you they will make them in public as well. And they will publicly shame us from time to time. Things will happen that you will think, oh my goodness, I hope nobody knows me here or I will ever see them again. It happens. I can tell you horrific stories, but I will not shame my own children in the process because we are human. We make mistakes. We are learning. It's a learning process. You never do something right the first time. It takes time and trial and error to get something perfect. And they also have accidents. Things happen, right? We also break things. We also, fall over things. We also have mistakes. So why not them who's still learning to control their body and their emotions and their words and their thoughts and everything? Someone said something nice. He said, never let your child's marks, school marks, or their behavior be a prophecy of their future. Never judge them. Never let it be a prophecy in your heart of their future. Because their mistakes is only part of the learning experience. It's not who they are. You're not trying to shame them for who they are. You are trying to correct the wrong behavior. They made a mistake. They got it wrong. No. That's not who you are. We were made in the image of God, and He is not a liar. Okay? So you told a lie, it was a mistake. That's not who you are. I know you can do better than that. There are consequences. Now I have to punish you because I want you to remember never to do that again. Do you see the difference? Saying, you're a liar and I must now punish you for that. That's not what we want to do. We sit them down and we say, your behavior was not good. That's not who you are. I don't like your behavior, but that's not who you are. And I have to give you, the consequences must be there. I have to give you the punishment so that you will remember not to do it again. Okay. Calmness, authority. How we discipline. Now, authority is something we all struggle with sometimes. I tend to remember that we don't feel qualified as parents sometimes. We say kids came with a manual because we have the Bible, and it's a manual of who we are as people and all those things. But specific situations and specific things that they do isn't exactly written up 1, 2, 3 there with a solution next to it, so that you know exactly how to go about it. And on top of that, they're all different. They all have different personality, so they do things different ways, and it's not so simple. So for the parent, I want to say this, you are qualified. The moment that baby is born, you are called a parent. Not just by this world, the mere fact of that baby's birth, and we will get to that when you're an adult and when you get married, you are a husband and a wife. Whether you had premarital training or not, whether you know what to do or not, the moment you are married, you are qualified by God. You are in that relationship, and that moment that baby is born, you are a parent. But it's something you must take up. The same as, especially this phase with a young adult, when you call that child who was today a child, and tomorrow you say, now I call you a young adult, that little person must take hold of that new authority that you've given them. And they must rise to the occasion. The same as us. When we get married, we are now told to be, we are now a husband and a wife, and we can do it. When that baby is born, that moment, we are actually born as a parent. Their birth births us as a parent. We weren't parents before, and now we are parents. And because all kids are different and because all situations are different, there isn't specific solutions for every situation. You will always feel unqualified, but you must grab hold of that authority that was given to you and say, that little person being 20 or 30 or 40 years younger than me definitely cannot be in control of me. That sounds silly if we put it that way, doesn't it? Because that's what happens. We feel so intimidated by their crying and screaming and their tantrums and everything that they do that we just give in. We just give them whatever they want just to restore the peace. But that is actually being a coward. We are grown-ups that are actually just running away from the situation. We are not solving it. We're running away from it. But it will come again. In 5 minutes or 10 minutes with a strong-willed child, or in a few hours or days or weeks with a compliant child, you will face the same situation again. So make it easy on yourself. Take up that authority. You are the child, and you are ordained and told by God to disciple that child. There's no option. It's something that you have to take up, and you have to take hold of and start living out. It's a command. It's actually a command. Okay. So rise up in that authority and say, Lord, I don't know what to do, but I have to do something, so please help me. You can cry it as loud as you can, and you will always be a child with your Heavenly Father. So you can come to Him in complete innocence and ignorance and say, I don't know what to do, help me, and He will help you. He will tell you what to do. Because there is no specific answers. I think most of the answers, we have the basic principles and we have the basic outlines, but inside of that, you have to know how to treat each child in that situation. So then the tools. Oh yes, there's great examples on authority. Let's just consider Eli and his sons. God punished Eli. He actually killed him. He took the priesthood not just from his sons, he took the priesthood from him, and he killed him as well because he did not discipline his children. God said to him, it's your fault. It's your fault. It's not them that are being punished. You will be punished with them. They are mature men, so they will also be punished. It's not like they were little children that were not trained by their father. He said, but they are now grown men, so they will take their punishment, but I will also punish you because you are responsible. You should have trained them. You should have fathered them and mentored them in the life that they were supposed to live. So Eli is a great example there for us. It was actually, I thought about some more, but oh yes, just an ordinary example. If we think of perhaps a traffic cop who comes to our door and they show us, they flicker their lights and they show us, go to the side of the road, just Stop. So they're not upset. They don't even, toot or anything for you. They just say, they flicker their light so that you know you're talking to them, or they come next to you and they say, pull over, pull over. And then you have to pull over and they come to the door. They don't shout at you. They say, sir, Mrs., you were actually driving 70 in a 60 zone. Are you aware of that? Okay. So if you could just give me your information, I must now give you a ticket. They didn't have to scream or shout because they have the authority. They have the authority. They're going to just give you the ticket. And that's the same with children. So obviously, when we look at the different phases, from the suckling, obviously, they're not there. But from here, it will look different, your authority, in the different situations. And you will do different things. But whereas with a little child, you will maybe spank them. Later on, maybe you will take things away. There's different ways of doing things. So we can look at the tools there. The tools are very important. The tools, when you talk about very young children, we spoke about disciplining your children from when they are born, basically. But it's not that. It's just to say it's in that specific phase. But it's not like you're going to spank them. Please, that's not what I'm saying. We do not spank a newborn. But I always had the idea that when they have the spiritual or the mental growth to put out their hand and to take something, they also have the capacity to know, no, I should not. It's the same thing. Take it or not take it. You see, what I ordered, I just thought like that, and I decided, well, I'm not going to wait until they start walking or until they're 2 years old. The minute they start taking hold of something that they should not, and they were basically just crawling. I remember one of our kids was about 4 or 5 months old, a very, very compliant child. You just look at her and she's in tears. And that child grabbed, she was sitting on my lap and I was drinking tea. Now the cup and the saucer was standing on a table, at the kitchen table, so I was holding her away from the cup and the saucer. But as I took it to my mouth to take a sip, she suddenly reached out to take hold of that cup. I mean, she was sitting here and she reached out to take the cup and she almost grabbed it, and by pure luck, I think, or grace, I managed to not to spill it because she was sitting right underneath that cup. And it wouldn't have spilled on me. That's the irony of the situation. She would have had the direct consequences of that scalding hot tea. So I managed to put it down, and I took her little hand, and you can use, in that case, I just took like this back of the teaspoon, or I like to use a pen or a pencil for a very young baby like that. And you just flip it across the back of their hands. It stings. It cannot hurt. It cannot harm them in any way, but it stings. Do that to yourself and feel how it makes quite a stinging sensation, especially when they're very young. It's enough for them to realize, this is not nice. I don't want this. Something is wrong. And that's all you want. That's all you want. Okay? So I did that, and I said to her, listen to mommy, don't ever, ever do that again. Oh my word. And there were 2 old ladies there, and they were so upset that I could scold and actually do that to that little baby. And I said to them, you know what? I would rather protect her by teaching her right now not to do it. Because every day I'm sitting with her on my lap with hot tea or coffee. And she could have permanent burn marks for the rest of her life if she keeps doing that and she succeeds in pulling that cup over herself. I will give her what she needs, but don't grab hold of what I do not offer you. Okay? Especially this cup. She must not do that. And she never did it again. So that was the end of that, and she was safe. She was protected. Good. So you can use, like I say, a pen or a pencil. Then as they grow older, obviously, I know many parents like the paplepel, the wooden spoon. But a wooden spoon, I remember my mother broke quite a few on us. They are, especially nowadays, not as strong as we would like them to be. So they only work up to a certain age as well. But what I say is the rod, as we call it, must progress with the child. So you keep using stronger and stronger things because you have to start hitting harder and harder. Because they grow up, and what used to work is now no longer working. When they are 6 or 7 years old, they laugh at you when you take out the wooden spoon. Sometimes, like you say, some of them actually have, not some of them, all of them actually have brain cells. And they see quite quickly that if they don't react, then you will find something different. So you must judge by their reaction if it is still hurting or not. Because they will sometimes fool you and put up a huge scene, and actually they're not impressed. So if they keep doing the same thing, you obviously see they're not impressed. So change the rod. Good. So you must really watch out for that one. We were talking about a scripture to go with that one, and we see there in Proverbs 13, if I can just find that scripture now, Proverbs 13, verse 24. He who spares his rod hates his son. He who spares his rod hates his son. But he who loves him disciplines him promptly, immediately. So the rod is not so bad after all. But I always say to parents, test it on yourself. And that's why I know I'm not abusing my kids. I know how hard I'm spanking. I test it on myself. I actually use that rod, whatever I use as they grow older, and I give myself a good one so that I know exactly how hard to go on them. All right? And I'm not trying to abuse them. I'm trying for it to be a crisis moment. It must be uncomfortable enough for them not to want to do that again. That's the aim. It's all you want to do. Good.